Hi, nice to see you again.
Great pleasure.
And today's topic is, as you've seen all of you on the invitation, Islamic finance, Islamic money. It's the lead topic of today. So please, if you have any questions, you can ask in the questions button in the menu down below. That's how you can communicate with us. So we do not see you. So if you speak, if you would like to speak, it's a one-way communication. So it's a webinar interface. So please use this question answer button so that we can read your questions if you haven't asked them before by the registration process. This podcast will be also published later, so you can then listen to it on our podcast channels. All right, so let's get into the subject of Islamic finance. Very interesting one, because lately we chosen it specifically because many of the non-Islamic governments are starting to have very strong ties or interests or collaborations and communications with Islamic governments and different Islamic banking institutions and organizations. And there is never an Islamic finance which is non-ideological. So there is always connected with the ideology of political Islam. And that's why we speak about this. It's very important because Islamic finance encompasses a lot of financial instruments. It is part of the political process of domination over the global economy. And it has certain specific elements which are very different to the non-Islamic finance. So we'll speak about this, but not exclusively. So if you have any questions also slightly or unrelated to the subject of Islamic finance, we will also speak about this. So I would also like to give the opening statements or some opening speeches to Maria and Joe. So I will give the word to Maria.
Mhm. Yeah, good evening, good afternoon, good morning from my side as well. I'm very happy to be here with you for the 11th time. Or I was not here all the time, but it's the 11th podcast. So um, I feel that political Islam is getting more and more influential, and I think the jihad of the money is the most effective tool of political Islam to increase the power in the non-Islamic Western countries. And that's why I think it's very important that we talk about that today. And just to start it, it's based on the primary doctrine. It's Muhammad already said in the Hadith that there should be money should continue to be paid to influence the Kafir, the non-Islamic ambassadors from abroad. So that's a very reliable and important hadith. And I think that this is happening a lot, and that's why we have to talk about it.
Thank you so much. Joe, Jose.
I was also going to go to the doctrine, which is that we have to understand what this Islamic finance is all about in general. Where does it sit exactly in the system? That it's important that we remember that jihad is not just violent jihad. Jihad is generally how to subjugate the kafir, right? How to make Kafirs, I mean, as individual Kafirs or entire Kafir countries, Kafir civilization in general, to make the whole world submit to Muhammad and Allah. And so, one aspect and very important aspect that we, of course, all know about is violent jihad. But there are all these other aspects of how to conduct jihad against the kafir. And it really encompasses so many areas of life. And one of them is this jihad of money, this or financial jihad, however you want to call it. And it has a lot of doctrinal support. And in fact, there are many instances in the Quran where when it's said to strive against the kafir or to strive in the way of Allah or to strive in the cause of Allah, something like this, it says with your wealth, right? So Quran 9:20, strive in the cause of Allah with their wealth and their lives. Quran 4:95, strive in the way of Allah with their wealth and their lives. And okay, one could think, okay, this is very general, right? But then you see Quran 9:41, go forth light armed and heavy armed and strive with your wealth and your lives in the way of Allah. Or even Hadith, where Muhammad says, this is Hadith Bukhari collection 2904, and you will see that he's speaking again about war, and he's saying, spend what remained thereof on arms and horses to be used in Allah's cause. Right, so it's not only necessary for people to, well, from the Islamic perspective, yeah, it's telling Muslims to make jihad on the Kafir, but not only with their lives, not only with fighting, but also with their wealth, with their money, with their horses and camels, whatever they have. Yeah, that they should be used in jihad against the Kafir. So that's where it sits. Where it sits is that Islamic finance is part of this jihad of money, of essentially throwing everything you have at the Kafir. It can be your lives, it can be your money, however you can get the job done to make the Kafir subjugate, to make the Kafir submit to Muhammad and Allah. So that's the context.
I would like to start to speak about one of the main parts, main tools of the Islamic finance, which may be not so clear because it's called charity, Islamic charity. And this is the Zakat payment, which is an obligation of an Islamic community. So it's an obligation dictated by the Islamic doctrine to every single Muslim in the world. And it's a practically, we can say, it's a tax on assets. It's a tax from all the assets an individual has. And it's something between 2.5% and 20% of assets, depending, but usually we can stick now with 2.5%. And zakat is an interesting thing because usually it's being really translated into our legal systems, non-Islamic legal systems, as charitable donation or charitable collection. And I have here an interesting quote from Barack Obama when he was the president of the United States, when he was having his speech in 2009 in Azhar University, and which is in Egypt, one of the most prominent Islamic universities in the world. And he said following, and I'm quoting, "Freedom of religion is central to the ability of peoples to live together. We must always examine the ways of which we protect it. For instance, in the United States, rules on charitable giving have made it harder for Muslims to fulfill their religious obligation. That's why I'm committed to working with American Muslims to ensure that they can fulfill zakat." Quote finished. What is zakat? Maybe Maria, you can take it. What is zakat? Jose?
Yeah, we can talk about zakat. So zakat is what Milan already mentioned. For our ears, we think that's charity, so it's given for the poor and to help them. But you have to know that zakat is from the primary doctrine. It's written in the Koran until the Hadith and all the documents on Islamic finance, that it can be used, or it should be used, for the cause of Allah, which is jihad, which is the spreading political Islam as much as possible. And I think we have to be very aware that this is hidden behind the word zakat. Behind the word zakat, jihad is a hidden term, and it's not hidden, it's outspoken. You can read it if you go in the documents. And maybe someone of us has the quote here, which is that for what zakat can be used.
Yes,
But,
yes. So
maybe you can.
Quran 960, it says the 8 categories of recipients that can receive support from zakat. And so it goes through these 8, and one of them is, and for the cause of Allah. This is the 7th category. And now we have to know that the cause of Allah, as it's repetitively used, in fact, in many Quran translations, after this phrase, it says in brackets, jihad. Yeah. But if you also weren't sure, you could go to the Reliance of the Traveler. This is a Sharia manual, section H on zakat. This is H 8.17. The 7th category is those fighting for Allah, meaning people engaged in Islamic military operations. So it's totally clear that that's what it means. And so it's in the Quran, it's in the Reliance of the Traveler, the Sharia manuals. So then you have this question, what is charity? right? Well, it's definitely not an obligatory payment to give to jihadis, to people engaged in violent jihad. Yeah, at least from the Kafir perspective, it would be unthinkable to name this as charity. This is one of these examples of words that can be confusing to us, that mean different things in from the perspective of Allah and Muhammad, Islamic doctrine, and from the perspective of the Kafir. There is no way that we could really consider this charity, right?
I would like to add to this that there is, from those 8 categories, we have the interesting category is the one what were both Maria and Jose speaking about, and this is the cause of Allah. And in this 7th category, which is going practically to support jihad, violent or non-violent, in the United States in 2008, which is 1 year before the speech of Barack Obama in Al-Azhar University, 51% from all of the Zakat collections were given to the cause of Allah, to jihad. So once again, 1 year before the speech of the Barack Obama in Al-Azhar University in Egypt, when he stated, I quote it again, I think it's very important to understand, that's why I'm committed, this is the quote, that's why I'm committed to working with American Muslims to ensure that they can fulfill Zakat. President of the United States of America said it 1 year after 51% of all the Zakat collections from the United States were spent in the cause of Allah, which means jihad, not necessarily a violent one. Okay, I'll let it sink for a moment. And when we come back to the quote from the Koran, this Zakat quote specifically, the Surah 960, there is also another category, which is the category number 4, and this is those whose hearts are to be reconciled. So it's for bringing the hearts together for Islam. What does it mean? So one of those 8 categories is the 7th, which is the jihad, way of Allah. And the 4th category is reconciliation of the hearts. What does it mean? It's also explained in Muslim Hadith, for example, 2303. And I will now quote, so that's what Muhammad said. I give at times material gifts to persons who were quite recently in the state of unbelief, so that I may incline them to the truth. Don't you feel delighted that people should go with riches, and you should go back to your places with the messenger of Allah? What does it mean? It means the reconciliation of the hearts. It's typically used, also the zakat can be used to give the money to journalists, for example, who can then favorably write about the Islamic political agenda. It can be given to potentially to people, politicians, influencers, and we come back to this quote, ambassadors. It doesn't have to be necessarily in the form of money. It can be also in the form of different levels of courtesy and invitations, and giving the different level of appreciation. Maybe a very noble dinner. It can be invitation to certain very high-profile events where they would not normally come if they would not be able to, and so on and so on. So the category number 4 can be overlooked very easily, but the category number 4 is for the reconciliation of the heart, for bringing people to Islam or to support the ideas of Islam, which is a very political idea by default. So the question is zakat charity? Should it be considered in the non-Islamic countries as a charity and codified like that?
And in fact,
maybe I can. Sorry, Joe, go ahead.
It's just that in many countries they are. Zakat is considered a charitable payment. Just so that we're clear, it's not a hypothetical. In a lot of Kafir countries, it's considered a charity, treated as a charitable donation with corresponding tax breaks and so on. So
tax deductible charity. Imagine this. Imagine that.
I want to come back to the topic number 4, the reconciliation of the hearts, because I think this is for the non-Islamic countries very important to understand, and all the listeners should go out and enlighten the people what political Islam is subverting in society. So there is a lot of money going into education. So we know that there are $6 billion a year going to the US universities, and that's not for joy and fun, that's to influence the education system, which is which is heavily, which we can see that it works. The second is that political Islam is subverting politics. Yeah, for example, I will repeat that the vice president of the European Parliament, she got a lot of money from Saudi Arabia or Qatar, and it was also to get something from her. It was about visa in this case. And there is a lot of, and of course, there is a lot of money going into education politics and into the financial system, so that the non-Islamic countries, they are completely dependent also on this economic branch, which is new established in the countries and which is seen as something good. Yeah.
Joe, would like to continue? Or
No, I
There is
Maria made the
another,
point. She made the
maybe
point.
just to add, maybe just I want to add this, that that there is in the since 1979 there was a fatwa which said that money should be paid for the jihad into the Western countries, so into the non-Islamic countries, and there is a complete strategy of political Islam behind, which goes back to Muhammad in Mecca and in Medina when he was a minority. So when political Islam, the members of the Ummah are a minority, they should keep together, they should be strong, they should live their culture, they should live exactly according to the Islamic rules, and they are supported by Islamic countries from abroad with money. And in the year 2005, there were $90 billion paid for the support of Islamic communities in the secular Western countries. So that's a huge amount of money which goes into the communities, into the mosques, into the education systems. And the goal is that Islamic children, Islamic communities, they stay together in their Dar al-Islam, a little Dar al-Islam, a little environment where they can live according to the Islamic rule. So that's important to know. And they even wrote in their strategy papers of Muslim Brotherhood, they wrote that it should be prevented to assimilation and to integration. So that's the danger. That's the threat for Islamic communities, that their members get assimilated or integrated in the non-Islamic countries. So just to know.
I would quote one more thing from Obama's speech, and I really suggest to every American, but also beyond, that you should read that speech. It will explain a lot what happened later, after 2008. So on economic development, that's the quote starts. On economic development, we will create a new corps of business volunteers to partner with counterparts in the Muslim majority countries. And I will host a summit on entrepreneurship this year to identify how we can deepen these ties between business leaders, foundations, and social entrepreneurs in the United States and Muslim communities around the world. And then why we actually chosen the pictures, what you see on the invitation, is from three countries. It was Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates. The reason is because the latest United States delegation was coming to those three Middle Eastern countries. And many business deals were done, many contracts signed, many things were happening during that trip. It's not unique to the United States. You could see it now by many countries. It's actually happening all over the world. But that was the most, I think, reported later in the media, and this economic trip of the economic success of the United States and the whole world, and to raise some awareness about business opportunities. Okay. We have to understand, and on the invitation was also the flag of one of the Islamic countries. It was Saudi Arabia, right? That was the flag on which is the Shahada with the sword. And how it's connected to that. It's always connected, and the main idea is that there is missing knowledge about what those Islamic financial instruments are, and then any kind of deal which is made with involvement of the money from Islamic countries, there is usually an ideological agenda behind that, because it always comes at cost, at a very high cost. And this is the ideological transportation of political Islam to the country which makes the deal specifically. There is always something extra, and we know that the money as such has an immense power, and the more money it's invested in the United States, around the world, in Latin America, in Europe, in other non-Islamic countries, the more Islamic influence you can expect. So that's this big world picture, and I think that if any one of you has any kind of access to any of the government in the world, please start after this podcast. We just give you some kind of overview. It's not a lecture, so we'll give you some basic overview of the financial instruments. Speak with local politicians, speak with the people you know, that also the people in the leadership of our countries understand that it's important to be aware of political Islam and its implications, specifically if you deal with the financial matters.
Yeah, I add one thought to this, because often the people say, yes, but Saudi Arabia and Qatar, so they are not Muslim Brotherhood. And I have heard that in America there are discussions to forbid Muslim Brotherhood. And I really want to mention that according to the vision of political Islam is unique. There is the whole Islamic Ummah is united in that. And the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the 56, 57 Islamic countries, that's the collective voice of Shiites, of Sunnites, of Muslim Brotherhood, of Saudi Arabia. So it's political Islam. It's not one branch against the other branch. And we have to be very, very aware that this is a whole vision of Allah and Muhammad. And you can't make allies with Saudi Arabia and Qatar and say, so we go against Muslim Brotherhood, because in one goal they are completely unified, and that's their vision to Islamize the whole world under the will of Allah and Muhammad. So we have to be very aware that there is we shouldn't use inner Islamic conflicts for our cause, because we will always be the loser if we do so. That's what I wanted to say.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to mention two things. First of all, Milan mentioned the Shahada. Maybe not everyone knows what it means. So it's what's on the Saudi Arabian flag, and it's a declaration that Allah is the only God and that Muhammad is his messenger. And I think this is very important and very relevant to the topic of jihad, because Muhammad says, and this is in the Bukhari Hadith 2946, he says, I have been ordered to fight with the people till they say none has the right to be worshipped but Allah. So this is what it means, right? And this is why Shahada could come with a sword, right? It's with an image of a sword. It's not it's not without its compulsion, right? It's very, very clear that it's beyond a mere declaration of faith, right? It is what it was. Muhammad is the perfect example according to the Quran. He's stated to be the perfect example.
89 times.
89 times, yeah. And he's part of the Shahada itself, right? And Muhammad is his messenger. So therefore, okay, Muhammad's example is very important. What is Muhammad's example? Well, exactly what we just said. You know, that he's been ordered to fight with the people till they say none has the right to be worshipped but Allah. And then his life reflected that, right? For the last 13 years of his life, he committed an act of violent jihad against the Kafir every 6.5 weeks of his life on average. So that's this constant striving and indeed violently fighting against the Kafir. So that's what it's about when it says, you know, Allah is the only God and Muhammad is his messenger, and a sword, and here we go, right? It's jihad until the whole world has submitted. So what we're talking about today is not, oh well, some influence, oh well, some money here, some money there. The final Islamic political vision is the complete submission of everyone and everything to Muhammad and Allah. We shouldn't lose sight of that.
It's interesting about this flag when I always I'm coming to some places where there are hotels, international hotels, or different global events, and this flag is hanging next to other flags. I was thinking that it was a actually genius move of the Saudi Arabia to put all of these things in the flags, because it actually says, in other words, the whole flag, that it dominates the others by default, because this is there is no, it's the Shahada. It's a part of the Saudi flag, and that's something what I think it's interesting when you see an American flag and the Saudi flag next to each other. Yeah, it's interesting what you put on your flag. It's also to think about this. It's at least to let it sink and, think about this a bit. Yeah.
And the other thing that came up was that you were mentioning now, the different delegations and so on. It's very important to just bear in mind that Milan's used this phrase before, we can't see into people's hearts. So it's not an accusation of any particular Kafir or Kafir country, or any particular person, that they are somehow working with political Islam, that they've somehow been subverted, that they're cooperating. In general, unless there's overwhelming public proof, it's not possible to know, and we don't do this. The thing that is overwhelming is the fact that Kafirs simply don't know what Islamic doctrine is about. They don't know that this enormous component of it, 51% of Islamic doctrine, is about how to treat the Kafir, and that it's not good news, right? And that that all these instruments are available, including this instrument of finance, of money. So it's not that, I would guess in the majority of cases, and I don't know, but I would guess in the majority of cases, people simply don't know. People think, okay, money's money, this is a good business relationship, why not? Or, oh, funding from this country, why not, right? We need the money for our educational institutions, whatever. People simply don't know. This is why the education really is the solution, because if people really know what's going on, they will think differently. And while they have no reason not to accept the money, yeah, then it looks good, yeah, and they don't know perhaps what it means, what that kind of influence means.
I had an interesting conversation with one Jewish entrepreneur, and he said to me that he's making a lot of business deals with Islamic countries, and when he learned about Zakat, practically that the more business he does and the more sales he makes, because he buys the products in the Islamic countries, the more turnover it's within the Islamic country, and the more zakat is being paid. And of course, the more zakat is being paid, the more is being invested into jihad, because this is connected like this together. So he said to me, but what if I do still the business and then give a little bit of money to support what you are doing, guys, yeah? Like that we will teach more about political Islam. I said to him, I will not give you any advice. I will not give you any proof or disproof of what you would like to do. I'm just saying it to you that whatever you do, the business specifically connected to the Islamic countries, it is always connected with the payment of zakat. The zakat is connected with the payment of the 8 categories, and 2 of the categories is reconciliation of the heart. It's one. And second one is the cause of Allah, which is jihad. So you make a choice. That's it. And everybody needs to make a choice. Countries, entrepreneurs, and individuals. When we come to individuals, there is a second tool of the Islamic finance, or instrument of Islamic finance, which is halal. Halal economy, halal businesses. And it goes far beyond food. It's always people think something halal, that's the same as kosher, isn't it? Yeah. It's like Bat Milan, this is Maria Joe. It's just the food. It's just the way how we kill an animal. And that's about meat. Then let's speak about halal a bit, yeah? So I would like to give a basic introduction into the halal topic. I think it's very important to understand that halal as such, the whole halal economy, it's not about, it's not the main thing from the non-Islamic point of view. It's not the main thing, the way how we kill the animal. And sometimes even it's happening that even different legislations, the Jewish organization and the Islamic organization standing together to defend the slaughter based on halal or kosher. But it should definitely not happen, because one thing is the ideological aspect of halal. And the ideological aspect of halal is that, and we come to this, it's connected to the certification process with the certification authority in the country. So You have a business, you need to create.
Milan, sorry to interrupt you, but maybe you explain that halal is permitted versus haram, which is forbidden, because maybe the people
Continue.
don't know. I don't
Then
know.
please just do this basic.
So just a very basic information that halal is what is permitted by Allah and
Thank
haram
you.
is not permitted by halal. And as Milan already mentioned, it's not only food, it's cosmetics, it's medicines, it's household
Exactly.
products, it's environment, it's everything. It's the modern concept of halal, which includes the whole way of life.
Thank you. So what's permitted by Muhammad and Allah? And of course, everything starts with the Islamic migration. So into non-Islamic countries is coming the Islamic migration. And there is a natural demand on halal production because that's what's allowed by Allah and Muhammad. And then, of course, it's connected to the certification process. And the certification process means that every single producer of halal products or services needs to pay a certification fee to a local certification authority, which is usually an Islamic organization. And this Islamic organization, because it's always connected with political Islam, then spends the money accordingly to the Islamic doctrine, of course, to their also business model, but because it's an Islamic organization, they have an interest to promote political Islam and the Islamic political ideas. Then we have a certification. Then it comes to the production and sales. And interestingly, the biggest or one of the biggest consumers of the halal products is actually not the Islamic community. It's actually the non-Islamic community. Specifically, we can speak about this in the case of meat. When we look on this, we can check our website, and this is very interestingly displayed how it's being done. And then it's coming to zakat, because the more of the Islamic businesses you have in your country, the more zakat payment is being made, and then of course the more money goes towards cause of Allah, to jihad, and jihad has a direct influence on the Kafir. So that's the circle, how it's being closed. So first you have the Islamic political migration, demand for halal, certification process, halal certification authority takes the money is distributed accordingly to the ideas of the certification authority, which is connected usually with local Islamic organizations, doesn't have to be, but can be, or different Islamic countries. And it's usually also used for the promotion of the ideas of political Islam. And then the Kafirs, non-Muslims, are consuming the products, sometimes not even knowing it because they don't check the package. And we are coming to the times when so many things are halalized in our shops that it is actually halal, but people don't know it anymore. Because you would have to make 2 production lines in every single factory in certain cases. So, or you would have to serve multiple dishes to the students in the school. So everything is becoming fully halalized. And the problem is that the halal as such, the halal certification fees are definitely supporting the promotion of political Islam in the local country. So it's a very strong ideological tool, which actually is independent from external financing. You don't need to get the money from Saudi Arabia or from Qatar into the country. What you need to do, you need to explain that halal is something, and which is also now being explained like this, something like very healthy, very, very ecological. That's in which category it's being presented. That it's actually good. So it's something what people should buy. So that's halal. And halal certification. And this is much more deeper topic. We can speak about this for hours, but that's what it is. So the non-Muslims are buying a lot of halal products. That's interesting. While they don't know it, if they buy it, they directly support expansion of political Islam. It's also interesting. And by growing Islamic businesses within the country, more zakat is being paid to the local Islamic organization, because it's usually collected by local Islamic organization, the main one, which collects the zakat, or the local places like this. And then of course it's being spent in those 8 categories, and 2 of them is reconciliation of hearts and the cause of Allah. So that's halal.
And it's fascinating because it's one of the ways in which a kafir can participate in his own downfall, right? And it's not just passively. It's not just that I didn't know or I didn't do anything. It's that I went out and bought some products and actively supported political Islam. Yeah, actively supported this ideology that wants to subjugate me, my civilization, and so on. So it's a fascinating thing, and most of the time, as you mentioned, Milan, unknowingly, you just bought this, and this, the usual products or whatever, and you didn't see that on the back there was a label that said halal. or you did and you didn't really know what it meant, or in some cases it's not even there. In some cases there is no label and you have to go and check it out on the website to see, check out online, see if you can find it, whether this product is halal or not. So a lot of the time you're participating without even knowing, but very actively.
Just a correction, I want to say actually halal producers of the meat. Also the biggest halal producers of the meat are actually non-Islamic producers and from non-Islamic countries. Yeah, so that's a correction. I just now thought, yeah, producers of the meat. It's interesting. There is a study about this.
I also want to add something which also the Kafir does unknowingly when political Islam gets more and more power. So imagine in your country, in the Western or non-Islamic country, the Islamic authorities established, the mosques are there, the whole organizational infrastructure is there. What happens? And from the very, very beginning of political Islam, when Muhammad gained power, what happened? The Jews and the Christians, they could live under Islamic ruling. They could still have their religion. This is the so-called Islamic tolerance towards other religions. And the Christians and the Jews, they had to pay the jizya tax, which is also unknowingly one of the most effective tools to transform non-Islamic countries into Islamic ones, because the more political power in Islam has in a country, the more they start to demand. They start to demand for the halal foods. Then the whole halal certification process is set up in the country. And then, of course, the Christians and the Jews, they do not show up their religion that much because they don't want to hurt the feelings of the Islamic Ummah, and they are not to buy. So the first rules, the Shurut Ummah, the first rules of this dhimmi status, this was that the Christians and Jews were not allowed to build new churches and synagogues, and they had to wear recognizable clothing. They were not allowed to carry weapons, and lots of little rules under Islamic ruling, which is established now in our Western countries. And the most effectful, and we can't express it enough, is that it's not allowed to say anything against Islam, Muhammad, Allah, political Islam. The whole set, you should not, the non-Muslim, the Kafir, should not be involved in the debate on Islam. And that's called the first, it was the blasphemy laws, and now it's going against Islamophobia. And all these rules, and of course, we could call it that we unknowingly, we pay the jizya, so we pay the social credit for migrants with Islamic background. And from the Islamic perspective, this is jizya tax. This is nothing but jizya tax, because of course it's their right to have the house, to have some food, to have their whole Islamic way of life around them. So we should not forget that there is a big other instrument of power, which is the submission of Jews and Christians under Islamic rule, which is step by step established also in our countries. I don't know if I explained it well, but maybe Milan and Joe, you can add something.
You did it, I think, perfectly. One more thing to halal is that this halal certification is fees, and I was shocked because coming initially from the Czech Republic, and short story, I was opening because in the Czech Republic, at least at this time, you could open a bank account of a local Islamic organization. And it's a transparent bank account, so you could see actually all the money moving in and out, because it's registered as a charity, or was registered as a charity at this time. It's maybe 5-10 years, I don't know. And I was seeing their payments from bakeries. I was seeing there from different countries, and then I was seeing payments from cosmetic companies on this bank account. I said, like, what is this? And then later, when I learned about halal, Of course, I can't confirm that, but this was very interesting to see all these businesses paying different money. So this is typical what's happening, that you have the payments done in that way, and of course you can then think about what a local Islamic authority will do with that money. What's the purpose of Islamic organizations as such? Because they are always connected to political Islam in this or other way. Okay, before we go to the next instrument, is there anything else what we can add to this, to specifically to halal?
No, I think that's enough.
Mm-hmm.
Well, interestingly, just a fun fact, it seems to be that one of the first things that enters a country, often you'll get some kind of halal expo or something like this, setting up the kind of financial infrastructure. Yeah, because of course some money is needed to set up Islamic organizations to start the ball rolling. So halal is often one of the first things that comes in, and it's extremely powerful. I mean, worldwide, it's many billions, so it's a huge thing. It's not just I bought the wrong packet of biscuits and a couple of cents went to the halal certification authority. Yeah, it's multi-billion dollar industry. It's and it's very, very significant. This is why it's really worth paying attention.
We'll publish probably within the next half year a lecture specifically on the Islamic finance, so we are looking forward, and some paper to that. So it would be wonderful that that you can also read it after we have it done.
Maybe we should encourage the people to use the Islamic darura principle, which allows, which says that what's the concept?
Necessity overcomes the obligation.
Yes, thank you. Necessity overcomes obligation. So if in a country the Sharia is not set up, if it's not possible to live under the Sharia law and halal is not there yet, the Muslim is allowed to eat non-halal food, because also Muhammad, when he was living in Mecca or in the early times in Medina, he could eat other food which was prepared by the Christians or the Jews. So it was allowed to eat non-halal food as long as it was not there. So, and this is an Islamic darura principle which could be applied by non-Muslims. So if, for example, in the school of Christian class school, which is mainly students with Islamic background, if there is no halal food, they would be allowed to eat other food because they live in Austria, and in Austria the Sharia is not set up in the way they would need it. As soon as halal is available, the Muslims can't choose anymore. They have to submit under Muhammad and Allah, they have to submit under the Sharia, and they have to eat halal. So it's very important to know for non-Muslims that this concept of darura exists and can be applied. It can be a good argument not to establish halal food in a school, for example, or a prayer room, or the veiling of the girls, or whatever. Yeah.
We are now finishing the short report on Darura, don't we, Joe? I think we will publish it very soon. So check our website or
I certainly hope so.
No promises, but we are working on it. Another tool of expansion. It's interesting because all of the finance, because it's so ideological, it's used to dominate the non-Islamic civilization. It's interesting because the whole financial system, the non-Islamic financial system, is based on business, on earnings, on profits, and that's what's driven by. Islamic financial system is based on the world domination dedicated to Muhammad and Allah. There's an ideological crown to it. You can't do any business when it's not regulated. And for that, there is a specific term for this, Sharia banking, Sharia or Islamic banking. And it's becoming very popular because it's being sold as tax, like interest-free mortgage or this and that, very interesting for people. So even the non-Muslims in non-Islamic countries are today buying and using Sharia banking as something good, that this is something very useful. So also we need to understand that, and the banks sometimes even the non-Islamic banks are creating Sharia banking subdivisions and starting to offer products, financial products, which are connected specifically to Sharia banking. You can see it in the UK, you can see it in other countries. Joe, you said it, and before we had the podcast, we discussed it, right? It was about in France, you said it.
Yeah, just that I became aware that France has made a lot of accommodations in terms of the financial system, not in terms of wide sweeping legal reforms or something like this, but a lot of accommodations have been made in the financial system for Sharia banking.
What does it mean that you then spend, for example, if you have Sharia investments, think about this, Sharia investments. You can go to Dow Jones and there is an Islamic index, Islamic finance index. You can check it for yourself. It's already existing. It's actually, I think, performing pretty well, and it's becoming, and it is prognosed that it will become a very big boom, specifically with the Islamic investment and finance. But look into what if this becomes more and more popular because it's very heavily ideological connected to political Islam. You can't do first. There will be non-Muslims excluded from certain decision-making processes because you need to have a Sharia boards deciding about the spending of the certain money. For example, the halal payment certification fees or zakat collections will go naturally through Sharia banking processes in the country. So there is a demand, of course, for the more banking systems being developed in the countries. And the regulatory activities are allowing it today in non-Islamic countries. So we have more and more this ideological Sharia/Islamic banking and investments. It's even being promoted as ethical, something like ESG. You can Google it. What is ESG? It's being promoted as something what belongs there. It's very actually hard sell, because by itself the Islamic finances, when it excludes non-Islamic businesses or non-Islamic areas of businesses like alcohol production or different other areas, then it's becoming also discriminatory in certain areas of the business. So it's interesting to see what's happening, but we need to understand one thing, that it is a cluster. If you buy into Islamic finance, you buy into this whole ideological monopoly which is ruling over these individual banks. It is not a competition in a sense. And Islamic banks, on the surface, it looks like they're also competing between each other. But in the end, the idea is the submission of the whole world to the Muhammad and Allah. There is this crowning of it. And therefore, it is incomparable to the non-Islamic financial systems. And it makes it very vulnerable. So when we fast forward a few decades into the future, when non-Islamic banks will still, with the courtesy, accept Islamic and Sharia banking and investments, they practically dig in their own grave. Economic grave, because they're just practically destroying themselves. They are being taken over, or they would have to be completely Islamized in the future, because you cannot compete with that system. It's united, because what is connecting one bank with another in non-Islamic countries? Competition. But within the Islamic countries, there is much more.
I'd just like to mention that there are several questions, and there are more or less an endless number of instruments that we could go through. Perhaps we can also answer a couple of the questions.
Kick it off, Joe.
What do you think? Okay. Well, there was one question: where does the money come from and who controls it? I hope that we kind of helped to answer a bit of that money, a bit of that question with where the money comes from. It comes from actually everywhere. So it can come from Islamic countries funding the Islamic community, as Maria said, so that they don't assimilate or integrate. It could be sending money to Kafir educational institutions to influence the program there. It could be to influence politicians, etc., etc. So it could be from Islamic countries. It could be from Islamic communities in non-Islamic countries. So, for example, the typical person is going to use Islamic banking, Sharia finance, and so on. It's going to be largely Muslims, although, as Milan mentioned, now a lot of the people investing, I mean, it's actually everyone. So Kafirs can also invest in Islamic investment indexes and so on. And so that's the third category. It's also Kafirs investing in Islamic indexes, buying halal food and so on, schools serving halal food, etc., etc. So where did the money come from? Everywhere, potentially. And who controls it? Well, then that's the thing. Yeah, as we were mentioning, and as Milan especially explained, it goes back to the authorities, whether it's halal certification authorities, whether it's zakat collectors, whether it's Sharia banks. Yeah, that these authorities then collect the money and then spend it in ways that are according with Islamic doctrine. Well, what does Islamic doctrine say? Yeah? Well, it has this 51%, which is about how to treat the kafir, and the instruction, amongst others, yeah, but it's a very important instruction, is to make jihad on the kafir. In fact, jihad against the kafir is 31% of Islamic doctrine. So what's going to happen with that money? A great deal of it is going to be jihad against the kafir. It's going to be all these different forms of subjugating the kafir, of making the whole world submit to Muhammad and Allah.
So also maybe one more instrument, which is the question is, where is the money coming to? For example, one of the ways how Islamic State was financed, and it's still a very popular way how Islamic or the jihad by itself is being financed, is actually through Hawala banking or Hawala system. It's not a banking per se. Yeah? So Hawala is the way that actually the money is not being transferred at all. If you will Google it, you will find immediately the picture. So practically it's usually done within small shops in the cities. It can be an exchange money shop, or it can be some small repair shop of mobile phones. And you come there and you give certain amount of money to that person who is called Havaladar. That Havaladar makes a connection with another Havaladar in Afghanistan or Syria or any other country of your preference. And that Havaladar gets a message, I got this money, that's the code. And then comes another person and gets the money from that person on the other side. There is no money transfer. And the worst on this, and that was one of the very popular tools how Islamic State was financed from non-Islamic countries. So Hawala system. But interesting thing is that, for example, the German government officially used Hawala while it is actually forbidden to do so, because it is going against all of the anti-money laundering principles, and everything is actually, that's forbidden. The government did it to support some people specifically in Afghanistan. And it's actually in the official documents. It was a big case in Germany a few months ago, so you can also Google that. So Hawala is something to look into, because it's completely untraceable way how the money is being not transferred, but transferred across the globe. Yeah, just an interesting fact.
There's a couple more questions. One is a local major mall. This is from the USA. A local major mall has now has a prominent store for Islamic women's clothing. It's frightening, and the government doesn't enforce local laws at the mosque. What to do when no one listens? Have alerted citizens group, and they call me a racist. Well, it's hard to say exactly what to do when no one's listening, other than to not be discouraged and keep going, because there are people who will listen. You may have come across a particularly difficult group of people. One of the things is that we have to also train ourselves in how to speak about the subject. I remember, honestly, myself having very unproductive conversations some years ago, because I recognized that I was too emotional. I was too sort of emphatic and enthusiastic and frustrated. Why doesn't this person understand? Yeah? But simply, most people are not aware. And so it's important to be able to explain calmly and reasonably why it's a problem, why it has to do with Islamic doctrine, to have a few percentages in your head. You don't have to, study an enormous amount, but just to have a few clear things in your head about this 51% of Islamic doctrine, that it's about how to treat the kafir, and that this is it's very difficult, it's very hard, it's very harmful on the kafir. And to be able to just be very clear that it's not about people, it's about what's in the doctrine, and then sort of start people going into this direction of, oh, there's a doctrine, and what does the doctrine say? Things like this. Also, asking a lot of questions can really help. Yeah, so just don't be discouraged and just take this as a learning opportunity. You can even think of the next person you speak to as a kind of user experience. I wonder how people are reacting to me. I wonder what I can learn from this. I wonder how I can do it better in future. Yeah, guiding people towards the doctrine and not getting too emotional. These things have certainly helped me.
I think the whole method what we are having and what Bill Warner developed and what we are continuing to develop as a CSPII, it's about this actually, to give the tools how we can speak about a subject. We cannot promise that you will never be called names, but we have to say also that it is a very effective method. The way we speak about political Islam, we speak about the doctrine, not about the people, and we speak about politics. Yeah, we are reboxing the Islamic knowledge or whatever is being spoken about Islam into the category of political sciences, political talk. It's not about religion at all. Yeah, it's very important because when people, I think the first thing is when people understand that political Islam, it's focused on the Kafir, on the non-Muslim, and it's a political agenda and a political ideology, then they open up because it's easy. Yeah? You don't have to touch the religious aspects at all. You can speak about the political doctrine. Maria, what's your experience with that specific area?
Yeah, I think you have to find allies, not a lot, just one and two, and you have to, you don't speak out publicly, or you don't speak out like Joe said at the beginning with a lot of emotions. You have to find one ally after the other. You have to meet them maybe 1, 2, 3 times, and all of a sudden you are a little group. And as soon as you are a group and you have some people who support your cause and go with you, and if you're not alone anymore, and maybe you find others who approach the same person from another angle, so that you are not alone with this topic. And yeah, you have to be very patient and continue and to speak it out and to ignore. So there are more and more people understanding that there is a threat on with political Islam. So I think it's a good moment to speak out and to start to be engaged. In Europe, for sure. In United States, I don't know, but I think we have to do that now. It's the last. Maybe it's the last time gap where we can go into that, because political Islam is increasing rapidly at the moment. Yeah. So I want to encourage everybody, and I think we are on a good way.
And the non-Islamic countries are in a big support of actually on the increase of political Islam because there is almost no information about the subject at all between the peoples. Yeah, you can see that there is more oil and gas production being delivered to Europe from Islamic countries, and they may think like this is impossible. You know, they do it all. The non-Islamic countries are taking so much, and all this money and all this margin stays in those countries. But also, I sent you now the link into the chat, all of us who are live together with us. For all of you who are listening to the podcast on our podcast platform, it's in the description of the podcast. It's how to get involved. So you can definitely become part of CSPII. So you can apply to become part of the organization and you can work with us. Or if this is not the way how you would like to do that, you would like to have a different style of communication or would like to have our support, you can attend our podcasts and take our documents, and we will support you as much as we can, and then just do your own thing. As Maria said, yeah, with the group, ideally, and we will be very happy to support you in any way we can. You can also donate to what we do because we all work as volunteers. And of course, the expenses must be covered, and we would be very happy that for all of you, if you have extra financial funds to support our activity, if you like it. And there is also a fourth possibility, or third possibility on that link, what you see, is that the possibility to learn yourself how to speak about political Islam, which gives the answer to what Joe said. And it's actually a lecture from Joe, video lecture, with a great document called The Guide. And the guide is exactly what you were asking about, or asking for even. The way how to speak about the subject of political Islam, what we learned from Bill Vaughan and ourselves in the practice.
Yeah, and one related question, which is a couple of people asked about where can they find these videos? Where can they find these podcasts? So it's worth mentioning, yeah, we have only one of the ones that we did so far
Yeah.
is actually live. We were just a little slow in uploading them, and thank you for your patience. It will be done. And so right now you can already look on YouTube. You can check Coffee and Pie, yeah, and just PI, yeah, and there you will find the podcast that we did in the Kafir, and the others are going to be uploaded. So thank you
Yeah,
for
on free platforms with podcast, the Apple Podcasts, Spotify, which is sound only, or video, which is the YouTube channel. Thank you so much. That was interesting about Islamic finance and Islamic money. So let's see what's next. Thank you so much, both of you. Joe, Maria, wonderful.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for joining.
Yeah. Thank you and goodbye.
Bye
Take
bye.
care.